Good afternoon, it's October 2017 and we're just a few days away from the next WASDE report. We've also just got some recent statistics out of the European Union regarding wheat, corn and maize balance sheets. So for those two reasons we've made a quick summary in our most recent risk manager report where we review and debate those balance sheets. But just to give you a very quick flavour of how we look here in Europe. When we look from a carry-in perspective, the carry-in stocks this year, almost universally across wheat, corn and barley are low. There's various different reasons from that lead back to last year's poor harvests, there was strong export demand, and so for various different reasons, our ending stocks from last year and carry into this year are low. So that's not a very good start. When we look at the production outlooks, wheat will account for something like 55% of our wheat, corn and maize production. To put a number on that, it's around 150 million tonnes of wheat when you include durum. The other 45% is going to be split pretty evenly between wheat and maize corn, something like 59 million tonnes of each. So that's our production outlooks. For wheat, this number is going to be up on last year's very disappointing harvest. Barley is going to be down and maize looks likely to be down as well. So at best, from a production standpoint, it's going to be a good average, is about really where we stand this year after a bad start carry in. So not a great supply outlook so far. However, when you look at the maize supply that we get from imports, that's going to be quite a high number, it appears at this point. At least the USDA are projecting a high number at 16 million tonnes of maize imports to come into the European Union from non-EU sources. This would be origins like Ukraine, like Brazil and like Canada. And if we look at the movements in the last few months, despite the import levy of around €10 per tonne, the movement of grain into the European Union has actually been quite robust. So there's nothing really to suggest that this 16 million tonne number is outrageously large. It's still achievable despite the levy. So for that reason, the USDA are probably going to be happy to keep that 16 million tonne number. And when you look at barley prices at the moment and the barley balance sheet and how tight it is, it's amongst the tightest of all the grains here. And if you see how it got that tight, it was because it ended up with a lot of feeding demand last year into the ruminant, pig and poultry sectors. At this point in time, the market for barley is trying to price itself out of the feed rations and letting cheaper maize take up some of the demand so that it can ease its balance sheet a little bit better. So that's the interaction that's taking place between here. There's some feeding demand also starting to shift out of wheat and into the corn market as well. Now, whereas most fluid on the wheat side is probably on the exports. So when we look at the exports, the current projection is 28 million tonnes of exports out of the European Union for this marketing year. Now, that's compared to 27 million tonnes last year, and it's compared to 34 million tonnes in the previous two seasons. So we're down on the really big years and up on last year. However, when you look at the export pace so far, we're down around 20% for the first quarter. So for Q1 exports in the marketing year, we're down around 20%, which obviously doesn't sit well between these two numbers, last year's 27 and the current 28.5 million tonne projection. However, when you look at the second, third, fourth quarters of the marketing years and what they achieved last year, if we achieved the same, we end up with something like 23 million tonnes of exports. If we achieve the same second, third and fourth quarter exports of the two previous seasons or the season before that, then we end up with something around 32 million tonnes, which takes account for the lower exports in the first quarter. So there's a big potential move based on historical movements around this 28.5 million tonne. But like our corn import number, there's nothing to suggest at this point, despite this lower 20%, that this 28.5 million tonne number is going to be adjusted by the USDA anytime soon. They may well do it in the next report, and it's probably a leaning to reduce that number, but they may be well within their rights as well to leave that pretty much as it is, knowing that 2 seasons ago we could have achieved much bigger numbers, even with what we've produced or exported so far. So, as you can see, there's lots of variables still to play in the European grain market. We're going to have a tight carryout as is projected today, and the big swings are going to be European exports and our interaction with Russia, and maize imports and our interactions with other markets, and the impact of the levy. So hopefully this is a nice quick summary and gives you a bit of a flavour of how Europe is panning out this season so far. There's a lot more detail in our Risk Manager report, which is available for download at www.intlfcstone.com. Thank you.